Fragments of Silicon, an integral part of Robot Masters since 1987.
All right, welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. I'm your host, Adam. Joining me, as always, is the regular crew. Yeah, not much more to this. Let's get to the news. Let's see. Petty Fan, why don't you start us off? Because, well, you've got things to say.
Well, Monday I went to go see the new doctor about my knee, and he wants to have another MRI done and another X-ray to see if it's gotten worse. And potentially I'm either looking at another injection in the knee or knee surgery, so that's not great.
Oh,
Eh,
I guess it's better than having your knee completely stop working.
eh. And it's
True enough.
like, it's kind of, if we go the surgery route, it may mean an earlier than your usual, like, mid-season break. It's something we're going to need to figure out if we go down that route.
yeah. Until we know, it's nothing we can
Yeah.
plan for, though.
Yeah. But it's still probably going to be around our normal mid-season break anyway. It might just be bumped up like a week or two.
Well, it's like if it's happening in December, we'd probably be taking all of December off.
Yeah.
Because, we're not going to be broadcasting during the December, Christmas vacation.
Yeah.
So. Anyway.
And then tomorrow I have my hearing about disability, so that's not something I'm very happy about.
I'm like, how are your nerves?
If I could drink right now, I would.
That actually might help you out. Like,
I've never been a big fan of alcohol, though, and also
no, not that. I mean, your anxiety.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I'm like, I'll talk about this more when we're off camera.
Yeah.
But,
and also I finally had a chance to return my headphones for my phone that broke, and have a new pair ordered. Though what kind of sucks is these new ones are Samsung, and for anyone who recently have been using Samsung phones, they switched to a new earbud style where they're more angled, and I'm not a big fan of those, so hopefully I can kind of learn to get used to them. If
Are you
not,
saying you don't have angled ears?
Yeah. Like, they're supposed to be designed to fit, I guess, better into the ear. But the problem is they kind of brush up against the side and don't want to sit right in my ears. So it's one of those. Hopefully they have enough like little padding that I can kind of mold them to where they need to go. Or I'll just be sending them back and getting a different brand. So that's something that's kind of developing. And I think tonight's the end of the Monster Hunter World's autumn event, at least for PS4, Xbox One players. So I might see if I can finish getting the rest of the event items I want, because I want to finish the Dante from Devil May Cry set and the Mega Man Palico set. And then hopefully they do another event in the winter so I can try getting the other stuff. And outside of that, I think I'm good.
all right. Alex?
Not too much going on around here. Work is, work. However, there is some interesting news in video gaming. A game I kickstarted 4 years ago called Time Spinner came out recently, and the level I backed it at got another code, so we gave that to Betty Fan, and we're going to be reviewing that in a couple weeks.
Mhm.
So I've been trying to play that because it's a Metroidvania, and it would be good to have someone who, got through most of it. And also, Mega Man 11 came out today, and I picked up I had pre-ordered the Amiibo edition, so I have that now, and it's still hard. I'm not actually super great at Mega Man games, but they're fun, so I've also been playing that a bit. I actually just got it earlier today, but I was playing it after work before the thing.
I've heard the new Mega Man is all right. Like,
I think it's good. It's certainly better than other attempts.
It didn't seem to have it doesn't seem to be having the impact that Mega Man 9 did back 10 years ago.
Well, to be fair, what was the time frame between Mega Man games between 8 and 9?
About the same, if I'm being honest. Okay, there was Mega Man 10, but, then the series went back into cryogenics for, until now.
Yeah, it's been like 8 years since Mega Man 10, I think.
So maybe not quite as big as a gap, but still, it's close enough.
Anyway, I think they did a good job of, certainly better than 7 and 8, of getting the feel of the 8-bit games in a updated visual style. It feels pretty snappy.
Yeah. I've heard good things about the new system. Apparently the soundtrack is terrible.
I couldn't hear very well, but what I could hear, I was not particularly impressed by the music. No, unfortunately, but
neither was I.
Just the fact that it plays well is good, because that's apparently harder than you'd think, based on the number of things that have, not managed to do that correctly. So yeah, that's pretty much the story of my video gaming for the last couple of weeks. I do actually have the games we're reviewing this weekend, so I need to put in some time for those too, but I really do want to try to finish Time Spinner because it's actually fairly story interesting. I shouldn't say story intensive because it's still scattered around, but I want to see where it goes. And I think that's about it.
All right. Well, you're up, Twilight.
Well, October's here, so the weather's been cooling down some, and which I'm thankful for. Well, the support beams for my bed's mattress broke.
Oh, fun.
Like at the bottom.
Yeah,
all of them?
Not all of them, but 2 of them did.
Okay.
Still got 2 of them, so we got those kind of spread out for now until we find some to replace them with. So I'm taking it a little easier when getting in bed at night, so don't cause them to break.
No pillow fights.
Our local fall festival season's come along as well, so I'm looking forward to the Apple Festival that'll be this weekend in the next county over, which is always fun to go to. Gaming wise, last week I bought The Last of Us Remastered, since they was having a 5th anniversary sale, so it's at a pretty good discount. And I, of course, also bought Mega Man 11, and I pretty much agree with everything that Golic said about it. And that's about it for me.
All right. I guess it's my go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, even though it's October, it's still hot down here. It'll start cooling off maybe in the middle of the month, like usually by November, things will get fall based, and
For a
the
Florida definition of fall.
well, it's upper Florida, so it can actually get quite cool. All right. Anyway, let's see. Had to run tech support today, which was not fun. Leave it at that. And yeah, I'm like, maybe looking to ditch cable soon. For various reasons. Like, we'll see what happens on that front. Like, maybe next month, maybe a bit later. It's just, technically it's satellite, but it's quite a bit per month, let's just say, and it's not being watched all that much anymore.
Yeah.
But
yeah, nowadays one of the main reasons to have a cable or satellite thing is because of stuff like Cartoon Network site and things that like require you to have a cable thing to use the online version.
Well, there are now stuff like cable cutting things like PlayStation View and Sling that let you get around that. It's now more for sports, really.
That too. That's why my parents still have it, I'm pretty sure.
And there are options for live feeds, like both legal and not so legal.
Fragments of Silicon reminds you to keep it legal, folks.
Just some people have been, some people have been telling me things and stuff. Like, and that's all I'm gonna say on that notation. But we'll see what occurs in that direction. Anyway, that's about all I got for news this week. And so merrily we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast. And this week we've got Arcand of the Undergroundies.
Hello. How you guys doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on tonight.
No problem. Right, so we like to start by getting to know the person behind the game. And we start out by asking you what got you interested in making video games, both on a personal and professional level.
For me, it was pretty recent. It wasn't when I was a lot younger in preschool and stuff like that. I definitely, I would send in, colored envelopes with art on the front to Nintendo Power, and me and my friends would send letters into Capcom and with enemy ideas for Mega Man, like you guys were talking about before. But I never actually saw myself in my future making games, because I guess when I was that young, I was never good with numbers. I was never good with math. I never saw myself writing scripts. So it happened probably a good 5-6 years ago when I finally programs like Game Maker, and there was a couple other programs out at the time. I guess it was at that point where I was like, okay, I could start doing this if, it was more so a way to bring my artwork to life. And it sounds kind of corny, but for me, that was probably the most exciting part when I first started, was getting my stuff animated, bringing it into like a basic game, and then seeing it move around, as basic as it sounds. But yeah, for me, it was like I picked up Game Maker. I also got a small drawing tablet, and that's when I also started digital art. I had done art my whole life, but I'd never done digital up until like 5-6 years ago.
Oh. And I'm assuming that the whole Game Maker experiment was rather successful.
Yeah, they have a. I still use the old version of Game Maker, which is 1.4. It's not the newest. It's not Game Maker 2. I still use the old version, and that's what I started with way back when. And they have a drag and drop system. So for me, that was something I could visually understand while I was doing it. Um, and then the further I got into it, after a year, 2 years, excuse me, I started watching tutorials and kind of figuring out how to turn the drag and drop into scripts. And then another year passed, and I was able to pretty much have an idea in my head, and I was able to script it. Or I still use drag and drop here and there, but it was a Game Maker was perfect for that transition from drag and drop to scripts.
So you basically self-taught yourself to make games using Game Maker, if I'm reading this correctly.
I mean, yeah. I watched a ton of YouTube videos. I mean, I was self-taught, but I had lots of, forums, YouTube videos. Sean, I don't know his last name. Sean, You Heart Beast. I mean, guys that still stream on Twitch and stuff. But those guys I learned a lot from when I first started. So I probably wouldn't be here without a lot of those videos and stuff like that too. So.
Fair enough. And I suppose the question is, how long did it take you to move on from this conceptual phase to actually making games?
Honestly, I started right away making games. All the different times in my life when I kind of had a goal or something I was fixated on, I literally just went nonstop until I was there. So in the beginning, it was kind of like a thing. Like I was like, okay, I want to eventually get a game on Steam, and it was just getting to that point where Steam was getting way too saturated. It didn't really feel, realistic making it through. But even before that, I made a game called probably my first real game was called Little Fuzz. I never really released that anywhere. It was just for fun, just a little mouse guy that would drop bombs of different types. And then after that, I did a game called The Underlings, which was kind of like what I guess Ugai-Saba is now.
Mm-hmm.
But way back then, I wasn't skilled enough to do genetics. I couldn't do breeding. I couldn't do any of that stuff. So it turned out to be, the game I wanted, but I couldn't really get it there yet. And then I also made Override, which I released Underlings and Override both on itch.io. I think one of them's free now. And then my first Steam release was called Trigger Saint, and that was like a top-down isometric-ish shooter, I guess you could call it. And that was kind of my first real time doing it like commercially with Trigger Saint, and kind of realizing all the things that come along with it and all that stuff. So for me, I literally just, I don't like to talk about it. I just like to literally, I like to plan it out, but definitely I just went gung-ho and just started making games. I even have like 20 other prototypes that you can like find on YouTube and stuff, that mechanics that I liked but just didn't work out for games. And so hands-on and just actually messing with it is what I went for definitely right away.
Right, and along those lines, what made you decide to go commercial, go to Steam, move to a new level, basically, in terms of development?
When my first release, Trigger Saint, for me, getting on Steam way back then was kind of more like a dream thing. Like, I want to see my game on Steam. When I first started, when I picked up Game Maker and digital art, I had seen Indie Game the movie, as corny as that one sounds too. I mean, a lot of people saw that movie, I think, and got very inspired to make games. And I think that movie really showed me that, okay, we're at a point now where you can actually do this. even though you don't know how to write the greatest scripts, and everything else. Sorry, I forgot where I was even going with that.
I hesitant to jump in because I'm not exactly sure myself, but
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, just run the question by me again, and I'll pick it up.
Yeah. Well, what I'm asking is, what made you go like commercial?
Oh, okay. For my first Steam release, like I said, I saw Indie Game the movie. I wanted to make games. For me, it was just a dream of getting my game on Steam. Just period. Just I want to get my game on Steam. To me, it wasn't really. It was cool if I made some money from it, but for me, it was like just seeing my game next to other games on Steam, knowing that people are really going to be playing it, and it was more just like a dream type thing. And I even got a gift from someone with like it was like $100 to put towards the fee, I think for my birthday.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it was just kind of like a special thing. With Ugai-Saba, I knew that it was going to be commercial, but for me, I don't do games completely commercially, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
I do other stuff. I sell art. I've been kind of selling art and working on art and commissions for the past like 15 years. So I did a lot of that. That's kind of like my main source of income. So for me, making games, if I do make money commercially, that's cool, but it's not what I ride on, I guess you could say.
I get what you're saying. Admittedly, that you're a bit of a rarity on our program since most people are, in the games business full time. But we do get the occasional person who it's a side gig and they have a day job of other.
Oh, I mean, I do this full time, but I do other stuff too. I work on Uwagi every day, and I live stream it every day. It's just more so I've made most of my income up to this point based on other things, and income isn't like if I don't make enough, like I can't finish the game. That's not a factor type thing.
Fair enough. All right, I suppose we should get to the game itself. Admittedly, I'm going to be a bit blind here because, to update our listeners, we got Ugai-Saba. It's an early access game. I'm like, tried to play it a couple days ago. It refuses to run on my laptop. It's got a problem with integrated circuitry. This has come up before with other games. I'm like, and unfortunately, due to a communication snafu, our other staff members just got their code, so they're going to be kind of limited in what they can say as well. So, we will proceed as best we can, but, I'm just laying out here that we're probably not going to have as much detail and nuance as we would have liked due to various issues. Anyway.
Still, we can start with, so, what kind of a name is Ugai-Saba?
So Ugai-Saba was kind of, I had a bunch of names. I was going to name it Underlings 2 at one point, just because I told you about the original game I made a long time ago. And for a while, it didn't have a name. I'm into a lot of Hellboy. Hellboy's probably my favorite superhero. I like to read a lot of the comics, and Mignola uses kind of the evil gods in that have these kind of Egyptian style names. I also used a bunch of Egyptian name generators, and then I kind of made a master list. I'm really weird about names, really important. So I made 2 huge lists of names and kind of just went through, combined a few, kind of was figuring out the lore at the same time for the game. So it ended up being Ugai-Saba, which means the beast sleeping in like the tongue of the game, basically. So it's kind of like my love for Mignola comics, Hellboy, the Egyptian culture, which I also really love, and movies and comics that I also watched and read growing up, I guess you could say.
And as I understand it here, this is a how to put this? It's a creature simulator.
Yeah, honestly, it's when I first started streaming this on Twitch and working on it for, in front of other people, it wasn't I didn't mean for it to kind of like build the community that it did. I knew that it was going to be a game that it's kind of like it's a lot, and it's not for everyone. It's literally like a Tamagotchi, a really fancy Tamagotchi with, you know, a bit more depth to it, mechanics. And for me, it was majorly inspired by the Creatures games from the '90s. And for me, playing those games was all about just breeding your own line of creatures and seeing what the new looks would be from mutations. And so ultimately, for me, I wanted to make a game for me, and like if I saw this on Steam, I would snatch it right up. And I think the difference from my first Steam release is with that game, um, I didn't. I liked it at the end. It turned out great, but it wasn't for me in the end, honestly. And it kind of ended up. It started for me, and it felt good in the beginning for me. But as I worked on it, it kind of slowly became like a game I was making that was more what people were into at the time, kind of like Nuclear Throne and games like that. So I was kind of trying to go with the popularity thing. And I think with Uagi-Saba, I think where I went right with this game was just going with my gut and going with what I wanted. And I'm just building on the point that yeah, it's a crazy game. It's kind of hard to understand at first. There's a lot to get into, but yeah, it's basically a creature breeding game. There's in-depth genetic system, um, and you kind of just carve out your own underground base. It's very relaxing and just meant to just I don't know be a relaxing Tamagotchi game.
Hmm. Like now, is it like based off of the principles of say Tamagotchi or creatures, any sort of previous creature care simulator?
I would say it pulls pretty much from all those games. I mean, I even played Pokemon when I was younger. I played Viva Pinata, um, all three Creatures games. I think they made a bunch of the Creatures games, but I played the first I think three. But I did a lot of studying on how the creators of the Creatures games did their genetic system, did their skin pigment. Um, so yeah, it literally pulls a little bit from all those games, and it even pulls games from games that I've played recently. This War of Mine, like the junk pile clearing, I got ideas from that, and it's not as in depth as the Creatures games. I mean, the genetic systems in those games were unreal. Like literally, they had organs inside their bodies that would like have real chemicals and everything. In this, it doesn't go as deep, but it's more so based on the excitement that I had seeing different colors in my newborns and different body parts. Like for me, that was like the biggest thing for this game was like everybody who plays this game has a completely different looking creature than the next player.
And was it difficult to implement your gene system here?
Yeah, it was something I worked more on in the beginning. I'm more so towards the end of development now, and I'm trying to stay a little bit more relaxed. But way in the beginning, yeah, the genetic system, because in school, I hadn't done anything on genetics since school, high school probably, and I had to kind of watch a bunch of YouTube videos and learn how basic genetics worked. I also read up on beta fish and how their skin pigment uh, genes pass on, stuff like that. Um, so yeah, it took a lot of time to get that base structure in there. Because I use a program called Spine, which turns the whole body of the Mystic into a skeleton, and then I can use functions to basically tell the baby inside the womb what body parts it's going to have, and then when it's born, the skeleton shows what body parts. And recently, I even added an extension which makes it so I can add individual color to every body part. So I mean, there's a huge, it's much easier now to add to it now that the structure is there. It's not definitely not as stressful as it was when I first was working on it. But I used an alphabetical system similar to the one that they used in the Creatures games. So I definitely got that idea from their games too.
I thought as much. since it reminded the whole system outlined here reminded me of creatures.
Yeah, it's like so if you have head A, which would be HA, and you had HB, which would be head B. If you got the genotype HA and then HB, you'd end up with head B because B comes further in the alphabet. That's kind of basically how it works.
And I assume breeding works that way as well.
With breeding, yeah, I kind of you grab gene packets from each of the creatures, and when I do that, it transfers all of the creatures' variable genes, all of their body part genes into those packets. Then those packets are turned into the womb, which inside the womb, all those genes are brought up next to each other and chosen based on male or female. And then the baby ends up having literally half and half of what its mom and dad had.
And how long is a average lifespan of a mystic?
It really depends. Like besides the genes I was talking about that have to do with body parts and color, each creature also has genes like hunger and thirst decrease and increase. So you might get a creature that has a really high thirst increase and a really bad decrease. And usually those creatures are much harder to take care of because obviously they get hungry faster and stuff like that. So creatures have also life force genes which control how long they live. So you might get a creature that literally from egg to full grown is half an hour, 45 minutes. You might get one that's an hour and a half, 2 hours.
And beyond, caring and raising these creatures, is there a grander element to this game? Like, are you raising them for battle? Are they being bred for a higher purpose?
For me, I didn't want any kind of battling in this. For me, it was, like I said, all about just literally the interest in genetics, evolution, the passing on of genes, mutations. For me, that was why I wanted to make this. But when I always make games, I'm really big into lore, so I definitely wanted to throw some lore in this. And once I started doing that, it got kind of, I wouldn't say out of hand, but I started adding a lot more lore stuff. And now, kind of what I'm doing before full release is getting the end game content in there. So as of now, there's like 20 artifacts that you can find at dig sites. Those kind of all have their own backstories. And then there's lore books which fill you in on what happened after the kind of disaster when the meteor hit. I'll be adding the computer log soon, and that's lore from kind of before the big thing happened with the meteor. So I kind of have like a few different kinds of lore in the game and the backstory. It's all optional. It's not something you have to sit and read through. And then, like I said, what I'm doing through early access is finishing the end game content, which is also adding a mystic skill system, and that is what the player uses to repair the computers, find the missing pieces, and then activate the great machine. And then that's how you end the game. And it's completely optional whether the player wants to end the game or not. But for me, it was kind of wrapping it up. And even for a game like this, you really don't need, I think, a story or even that much lore. But for me, I think it was important that I had, like, in the Creatures games when I used to play those, I kind of always wished there was a little bit more information about the species that created the Norns, because you see stuff all around the levels and kind of hints to what it was like. But I always wished that there was a little bit more that I could learn about that. So I think that's why a lot of things you'll see in Iwagi are actually things like I wanted to improve upon from things I didn't like in certain games too.
Right. So, on the topic of lore, outside of like this being named after one of your prototypes, like are there any hooks to your past work?
What do you mean?
How do I put this? Does Ugai-Saba and, say, Trigger Saint, are they in the same universe?
Yeah, all my games are pretty much in the same universe, and there's even the end of this game, Uagi-Saba, has to do with the start of the story of Trigger Saint. And I even have there's an artifact that you can find in Uagi-Saba that is actually an Easter egg to Trigger Saint. It's a Kuna module from the weapon in Trigger Saint. And there's also a couple other Easter eggs that the player can find that have to do with my other games and also other games I like Super Metroid and other games I played growing up.
Neat. Let's see. So how far would you say this game is away from completion?
I've set full release to be November 30th. I did early access with Trigger Saint, and I'm doing early access with Uagi-Saba. For me, early access, I usually do tops like 5-6 months, and that kind of usually just gives me time to finish the last few things to get some really good feedback. For me, this time, early access was mainly based on I wanted to finish endgame content, but I also wanted to start getting some real feedback and get people playing it ultimately, get some kind of hype going around. I think early access is a really good way, especially for how saturated Steam is nowadays, to kind of like really kind of build yourself up for full release, because honestly you still get the same amount of coverage when you come out into full access out of early access. I mean, some people might say, early access isn't the best way to go, but I like kind of just like being in there for a few months, finishing up the content kind of in a relaxed way while people are enjoying it. And honestly, it's been going really great so far, and I've made a lot of crucial changes that we got in feedback. So yeah.
Well, if it's working out for you.
Yeah, definitely. With Trigger Saint, it ended up going really well going through early access. I mean, before with Trigger Saint, they did the visibility rounds a bit differently than they do now. But still, I think early access, like I said, if used right, it can work good. So November 30th, that's when I'm setting to release into full access.
Okay. Like now, is this going to be for Windows only, or are there Mac and Linux SKUs as well?
The thing is, for me to put it on Mac, I would have to get a Mac computer. I'd have to sign up, I think, for a developer, account or something. There's a few steps I'd have to go through to release it on Mac. If for some reason Uagi makes me a decent amount of money, then maybe that's something I could do. But I'm pretty limited to what I can export to, with especially using the old version of KMaker, which is 1.4. So I won't be able to do SteamOS. I won't be able to do Switch. Like I said, no Mac until like I said, buy a Mac or find somebody who has a Mac who'd be willing to do that. But other than that, yeah, just PC for now.
Got ya. Right. I'll see if my colleagues have any other questions.
I can't really think of any. Like, this is a fairly interesting game. Like, there are some things that aren't super intuitive, but I imagine those will be ironed out as development progresses.
I think like the main issues I've been getting from players. At first, the main issue was like the temperature system, which I finally fixed. It was a little bit too confusing. The tutorial is probably the second biggest issue. It needs to be expanded on. When I originally made the tutorial, there was only so much in the game, and now I've added so much content that it really just kind of cuts off and leaves the player still kind of wondering about all these things. And since it is a game that has, I guess you could say, a lot of depth to it, and things to get to know and understand, it was really hard making the tutorial, because like I completely understand this game, but then when I see somebody else play it, it can be a mess sometimes unless you teach them how to play.
Yeah,
Um,
that's one of the
so
biggest issues we have a lot where I know how to play this game just fine. Oh, wait, they're not me.
yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's, I think I went through a big like 3 weeks on my stream with my viewers, like really talking about, how to teach the player, and just it's you really when you sit down and really start working on a tutorial, you really start kind of looking at it from the outside view, I think, and it's really helpful, I think, to probably start working on a tutorial earlier in development rather than later, because now I can just kind of go back and expand on it. And before the next patch is going to be at the end of this month, and it's going to have expanded tutorial and stuff like that, because all the tutorial stuff you can find inside the hub, but even then, um, some people have a really hard time. And probably the third biggest issue is just balance. I mean, there's so much stuff in this game that needs to be balanced, and so many resources. um, some of the players seem to not like it being so busy. So I'm kind of trying to figure out ways to make the game less busy and more focused on creature care rather than running around harvesting mushrooms, keeping your temperature high, harvesting your elixir. Like, I want it to be a little bit more relaxed than I have it now. So yeah, there's definitely lots of stuff that needs to be fleshed completely.
Right. Yeah, I think that's it from me, unless anyone else has anything.
I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You said there's a lot of lore available in the game, but how do you get access to that? Do you like unlock it by raising different things, or do you like get the ability to look in places somehow, or?
So the first kind of lore would be from the lore books. Lore books randomly appear on shelves. Like, you can see some of the shelves in the rooms, and you click on those, and that's kind of, like I said, the lore that takes place after the meteor hits. Um, Once you get a dig site, and you start digging up stuff with the dig site, you have a small chance to get artifacts. Um, you can increase this chance by having more lore keepers, and you convert your workers into lore keepers. The more lore keepers you have, the higher chance you um, have of getting artifacts at dig sites. And the dig sites all have their own backstory, based on, you kind of learn about the tribe, or the tribe and their leaders based on the items that you find. I eventually want to have some of the items unlock new genes in the mystics, but that'll probably be closer to end game. And then the computer logs, which are going to be in the next patch, are based on the repair skill that you can teach your mystics. And then once you repair those, you'll be able to read what's on the computer logs. So that's the three kind of ways you get, different lore in the game.
Okay, that makes sense. I was just wondering because it didn't seem like there was like a thing where you like explore with the monsters that much, but I guess you were.
It's more so, when I talk about exploring, it's like carving out rooms, finding new stuff about Sanctuary. The monsters are all stationary. When I actually first started this, they could walk around. They were like bipedal. They could walk around. And I just eventually, like with the old Creatures games, your creatures could walk around. But for me, that was, like, honestly way more stressful. I could never get the creatures to breed. They always just went off and ate poison fruits and died. And I literally could never get, like a real. I kept trying, but it was just always frustrations for me. So I wanted to make the Mystics stationary. I eventually made them stationary. So it's more so, like I said, about the subtleness of seeing what your baby's going to look like, and also loss when a creature dies, the feeling of kind of feeling good when a creature first hatches. I've seen players get really excited about their first mystic, and it's stuff like that that you don't realize you're going to see when you see people play, but you eventually do. And I think that's kind of what's really important, too, with this game.
Anything else?
I think I've got my questions answered.
Twilight?
I think I already had mine answered.
All right, then. I guess We'll end things by asking about pricing. So, how is the pricing going to work here? Is it going to be $14.99 throughout? Is it going to increase when it gets to normal release?
Well, I wanted to make sure, like, I think with Trigger Saint, I did like a really hefty discount for early access. And for Uagi-Saba, I really didn't want to do that. I wanted to make it literally just 10% on release into early access and then 10% on release into full access. I didn't want anybody to feel like they were cheated or, some people got it way cheaper. I just didn't want that this time. So I just said, okay, we're going to do, 10% full release, 10% early access. And then once that's done, it'll probably stay $14.99 for quite a while until we get to some, couple, like a year later when I'll probably start doing some regular discounts.
Right. All right then. Thank you for stopping by and taking time out of your schedule to be on our program.
No, it was a pleasure. You guys have an awesome setup here. Very nice.
Oh, good to hear. Good to hear. The game is Ugai-Saba. It's currently in early access on Steam. You can get it for $14.99. Full release expected on November 30th. Be sure to check it out today. Betty Fan, play us to the next segment. All right, welcome to the topic of discussion. So this week we are talking about the PlayStation Classic. Well, as much as we can talk about the PlayStation Classic Mini, because, there are still a lot of details we do not know.
Mm-hmm.
For one thing, it doesn't actually physically exist yet.
Yeah. It was announced a few weeks ago. We were supposed to talk about it last week, but things happened.
Then Telltale happened.
Anyway, this was announced at the Tokyo Game Show. Sony is following in the footsteps of, everyone else.
Mhm.
They are putting out their own mini console. So the first thing about it is we don't know all of the games yet. And this is definitely a difference from like Nintendo. Like when Nintendo put out their games lists for their mini consoles, we knew the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember if they kept their game list a secret. I think they did for a measure of time, but once they announced it, they announced it.
I think
Sony's,
once it got a street date, they announced everything.
Yeah, something like that. With the PlayStation Classic, we know there are going to be 20 games. We do not know all of those 20 games.
And there will only be 20 games.
We'll get to that when we get to that.
Yeah.
But what we do know is the game, it will include Final Fantasy VII, Jumping Flash, Ridge Racer Type 4, Tekken 3, and Wild Arms. These are the 5 games that have been announced so far.
Which is a pretty good variety of, hey, that's kind of really well known on the PlayStation, and also games that a lot of people probably haven't heard of, but were pretty good, so maybe they'll get fresh eyes on them that way.
Well, yeah, Final Fantasy VII, Tekken 3, 2 of like the games that defined the PlayStation back in the day. Ridge Racer Type 4. We'll come back to this because this will tie into one of the biggest mistake that Sony's making with this thing. Wild Arms. Wild Arms, obviously not the mega successful RPG that Final Fantasy VII was, but from what I remember, Wild Arms did decently. Certainly decently enough to spawn a pretty long-running franchise. I mean, it got at like 5-6 games, something like that, over 2 generations.
Something like that, yeah.
Jumping Flash is the true. You probably don't know what this game is.
Yeah, unless you follow Naka, really, you don't know what this game is.
Yeah.
Or if, for example, you had a friend who had it and played it when you were a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, Jumping Flash is a first-person platformer that predated Mario 64 by a good year. Like, so it's a platformer that doesn't play by the established rules of platforming because those rules literally had not been established yet. Like, it's a good game. Obviously rather kind of wonky by today's standards, but it is a gem that got missed. Although maybe not missed too much because it did get a sequel, actually 2 sequels, but that's neither here nor there. So getting back to Ridge Racer Type 4, the problem with this inclusion is because the Sony PlayStation Classic is coming with a regular PlayStation 1 controller. That is to say, the controller you got at launch.
Mm-hmm.
And that means they are not including the dual analog controller, which is a problem because there are a lot of games that took advantage of the analog controllers.
Some
That's
that
the-
actually required it.
Yeah, I was about to say
Mhm.
later in life there are some games that won't even start without a DualShock.
Yeah,
plugged
like
in.
Yep.
we don't know what's coming, but I can tell you right now, because the DualShock is not there, Ape Escape will not come because you literally needed that to play that game.
Yeah, which is a damn shame.
Unless they do like a PlayStation Classic 2, not to be confused with a PlayStation 2 Classic that has the Dual Shocks or something, because
And that ties into Ridge Racer Type 4 because this game really was designed to take advantage of, analog controls.
Yeah, playing
Mhm.
racing games with a D-pad is ooh.
Yeah, that can get rough.
Especially with Ridge Racer Type 4, it came with this really excellent controller called the Jog-Con, which had this steering wheel type thing in the middle. And unfortunately, you're not going to be able to use that. You're not going to be able to use any actual controllers on this thing. It's, at least as we understand, I believe it's going to be USB. Once again,
It's
like
hard to tell from the promotional material if that's a USB
Yeah.
or a proprietary connector.
I'm willing to bet it's going to be USB.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we
Now-
know it's not going to be the PlayStation 1 style connector.
Right.
Unless they're
So-
making one that looks like it but smaller.
So it's gonna, unfortunately, this is gonna have a lot of the same limitations as Nintendo's mini consoles. That is to say, if you've got real accessories, you're not going to be able to use them on the mini here.
But at least the Nintendo ones let you use other controllers. Like you could plug any, I think Wii, like anything that will plug into like Wii remote would be supported by both NES and SNES minis.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
honestly, it would be better if this thing just supported PlayStation 4 controllers because, that means you'd have the dual analog thing that's missing from here.
Also wireless.
Let's be honest, throughout the entire career of the PlayStation, the controllers have not changed that much.
Nope.
Yeah. Like I think the biggest change aside from DualShock becoming a thing was the PlayStation 4 ergonomically.
That and also the touch pad
Yeah.
thing.
Actually,
Yeah.
one of the biggest changes was with the PlayStation 2 controller. Because that one had analog buttons for some reason. They didn't get
But
used.
did they even keep that?
No, they did not.
Yeah, I was about
No.
to say.
Yeah.
It was a big change, but it wasn't one that took.
Well, the PS3 did keep the analog triggers, though, at least, so there is that.
Well, analog triggers were a standard by then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Analog triggers is one
Yeah.
thing. Analog face buttons is significantly less common and less necessary.
Yeah, I'm like, without analog triggers, good luck with racing games.
Ooh, yeah.
Oh
The new
boy.
Nintendo Switch, I don't know why Nintendo keeps doing this. We know they can make analog triggers. The GameCube controllers had some good ones. But
Yep.
that's an aside. Anyway, as So, and I believe Sony has announced that only the 20 preloaded games are, they're the only ones you're only going to be getting.
There's not going to be any normal way to add more games to it.
Looks over at the modding scene. Do your work,
that's
boys.
not to say that it will even be particularly hard to mod. There's a distinct possibility it won't, but
Yeah. There is an entirely real possibility that could just be a Raspberry Pi in a PlayStation shell. And
Yeah,
oh
Sony
boy.
Sony doesn't want it to.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we do not know what is currently under the hood of the PlayStation Classic because, once again, like Nintendo, they are keeping the actual specs a dark secret.
Yeah, there is a very high chance that we will not have any idea what is inside of it until someone gets their hand on one and takes it apart.
Yeah, until
Which
Street
will
Date.
happen quickly, but
Yeah, what we're getting at here is Sony is very clearly taking a lot of inspiration from Nintendo in their mini console, which is pretty much the story of Sony.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
like I said in the writing room, to me this seems like a knee-jerk reaction to the success of the NES and SNES minis.
Yeah.
No, it is.
Like, I imagine if they would have flopped, we wouldn't be discussing this right now.
Very possibly. But it's like those things were successful, so Sony wants their piece of the nostalgia pie, and there's definitely that for the PlayStation, especially since the original PlayStation is now over 20 years old. Games like Metal Gear Solid are hitting 20 years this year. I'm like, PlayStation nostalgia is ripe for the plucking.
Yep.
You're making me feel old, Adam.
I'm sorry, I can't help the passage of time. That's just how it works. And I'm also willing to bet that, if there are games I would like to see on this, it would be like the PlayStation version of Doom or Descent, because the PlayStation had some interesting features, like the PlayStation Link cable, where you could it's like, if you don't know what this is, the PlayStation could link up to each other
for console LAN parties.
Basically, hugely impractical back in the day, but it was it was the closest thing you were getting to reenacting the actual experience of a Doom LAN party. It's like, but I don't see that feature ever being utilized in this mini device. As far as the remaining games, outside of not knowing them, we don't know when Sony's going to announce the remaining games, if they're going to drip feed them. We don't know if we are going to have region differences.
Because remember, Nintendo did.
Right. We don't know if Sony's going to pull out some prototype, some fully released game.
Is there any big titles, though, that never really was released, like Star Fox 2?
None spring to mind, but I'm like, that's up to Sony to figure out.
Yeah. Because, I know Star Fox 2 is a glaring omission because it was done, and Nintendo pulled the plug when they were getting ready to print the cartridges. That was a 0-hour pull. That's why a lot of people were pissed about it.
We're also not certain the country of origin, if we're ever going to see any Western-developed PlayStation games on this thing, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon, what have you. Sony still has publishing rights to the PlayStation 1 games.
Yeah.
Which is why they are on the PlayStation Store. And that does get into kind of a fiery debate around this thing, is it's suspected because this thing is a thing that this is the reason why the PlayStation 1 classics have not hit the PlayStation 4. You know,
See, if this would have come out around the launch of the PS4, I'd be more likely to believe that. But there are rumblings of a possible PlayStation 5 in the mix. So I don't think this was planned from the start.
yeah, it's like they just weren't interested in continuing the lineage.
Yeah. Especially because their streaming service, PlayStation Now, it has PS2 games and
Yeah.
PS3 games, so...
Oh. It is, like, the point is, we can't say for certain whether it is or if there is a connection between the two.
Mhm.
Now, we do know the price. This thing is going to retail for $100, which might seem a bit rich for the blood on the surface, but once again, take into consideration we are talking about PlayStation 1 games. You know, we're talking about 20 PlayStation 1 games. PlayStation 1 games are, you know, quite the leap.
They're a further step up from Super Nintendo games.
Right.
At least in terms of effort and stuff that it took to make them.
The only thing is they've already paid for that. To put them on the PlayStation Mini cost barely anything.
No, but it's like a expected amount of cost.
Right. But the point of order is, you know, just with the list we got here, Final Fantasy VII, Jumping Flash, Ridge Racer Type 4, Tekken 3, Wild Arms, these are all games that are going to take a while, to play through. Now, it's like,
it doesn't scale like 1-to-1, but I mean, Final Fantasy VII, it's alone is a game that when it is or were re-released, it would probably be like 20-something bucks at least. Yeah. Probably more.
And I just realized because PlayStation 1 or Final Fantasy VII was a multi-disc game, are they basically going to use the PC version?
Because the possibility.
The PC version didn't have the disc swapping thing. So that's going to be something interesting to find out. I don't know, just some random musings.
Or are you going to have to like hit a button to swap the disc?
I hope they don't make us do that. Because to swap discs, you actually have to go over to the console and hit the reset button. The whole reason why somebody wants something like this is convenience.
Anyway,
Petty fan, authentic experience.
Anyway, overall, in terms of mini consoles, this thing is off to a promising start, but there's still too many unknowns to make any proper judgments.
Yeah, like the rest of the games could all be junk for all we know.
I doubt that.
Yeah. Unless Croc shows up.
It's like I severely I'm pretty sure the game lineup is going to be pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah.
It's like.
Though not having DualShock support is gonna really limit to a lot of the good stuff from later in the lifetime. Like, I believe Metal Gear Solid needed DualShock. Or was better played with it, at least.
Well, yeah, it's like by 1998, DualShock support was pretty commonplace. Yeah. Not universal, but
the Spyro games played better with DualShock.
Yeah. It's like, so, we're going to have to revisit this down the line because, we only know like a fourth of the total game lineup.
Yeah.
It's like, so,
and for all we know, they could end up releasing the DualShock controller separately, which that would suck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way,
especially since it basically... Especially because if this really is a non-expandable thing, then there's really not any reason to not include it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Other
or
than
rather,
extra money.
There's not really any excuse for why it would be okay.
Yeah. Like, oh, here's like 4 or 5 games that need DualShock, but that's an extra $40. Good luck.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, yeah, so that's about all we got on the PlayStation Mini Classic. Well, the PlayStation Classic. It's just kind of hard not to say mini because it is a mini console of the PlayStation.
Yeah, did I hear something about like the controllers are actually going to be smaller too, or?
The connectors are either going to be USB or just mini PlayStation connectors, but I think they're going to be like actual PlayStation controllers.
I hope they have better cord length than the Classic series.
Oh,
well,
and
then the NES Classic, the Super NES Classic, at least partially fixed that.
oh, another thing that this doesn't come with like any sort of power brick. You have to supply that yourself.
That's promising.
I mean,
Yeah.
at least it's a standard. I believe it's micro USB. So there is that, as long as it didn't require some weird like quick charger voltage. You know, if I could like power it off the back of my TV, then whatever.
Oh, all right, and yeah, so that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments Silicon. Let's see, the week ahead. Do we have anything on Final Fantasy XIV?
We should have raid Thursday and Saturday, barring anybody canceling.
Okay. You're not picking up any new people or anything like that?
Well, the thing is, if we have to pick up like random people, we don't usually raid because a former member of our free company, which is kind of like a guild, said some very, very terrible things on air when streaming with some other people, and like, yeah, no, we don't want that.
Right. Let's see. On Friday, we will be covering the game Prismata. Kind of a video on this, even though it's early access. Like it recently went free to play, so we'll be doing that. Let's see. And on Sunday, we will be reviewing the game's Game Dev Studio. Not to be confused with any development kits or anything like that. It's a tycoon game. Like, and not the only one of these either. Like, you know, there is the much more famous like Game Dev Story, if I'm recalling the title, and we'll also reviewing Solid Aether. And yeah, so until next time, I shall be wishing you good gaming.